It's story time. It was Ryan and Nate's first time camping at Anawangin Cove. With no electricity or cell reception, it was the perfect place to unplug and reconnect with nature after their hectic work week. Ryan had been particularly stressed lately, to the point of having frequent nightmares and episodes of sleep paralysis, and Nate wanted to help him relax. The cove was a pretty busy tourist spot, but luckily they were able to find a spot that at least felt somewhat isolated. Ryan chopped down some very short trees for firewood just as the sun went down. They built a fire, laid out some blankets, and cracked open some beers. Nate had already reached weekend mode. Ryan was far behind. Ryan, take a deep breath, be in the moment. Worrying about the budget right now isn't going to change anything. Yeah, I know. It's just really hard for me to disconnect. That's why we need to do this more often. The two friends clinked their bottles and cheered to a relaxing weekend. 2 beers turned into 4, which eventually turned into 10. Ryan and Nate were now completely passed out on the forest floor, head to head. Sometime in the middle of the night, Ryan awoke with a gasp. He felt like he was suffocating. He tried to move his arms and legs, but they felt like concrete. Fortunately, this wasn't the first time he'd experienced this. This is just a dream, a stress-induced nightmare. Ryan tried to reassure himself. Just try to wake yourself up. As Ryan lay there, he directed all his focus on moving his head. Just an inch would be enough. But it would not budge. You're not in any real danger. This will all pass. He could hear his breath getting shallower and shallower as the pressure on his chest increased. And that's when he heard it. The breath of someone else. Although he was unable to move his eyes, he shifted his focus downward toward his chest. In his peripheral vision, he could vaguely make out what appeared to be a bald, 300-pound figure sitting on his chest. That had never happened during one of these dreams before. Ryan tried to call out to Nate, but his jaw was frozen shut. The figure now leaned over, coming into Ryan's full view. This isn't real, it's just a nightmare. This isn't Ryan repeated over and over in his head. Just a nightmare. Then he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Finally, Ryan thought, Nate had woken up and was going to help him. But the footsteps walked over to the pile of wood. Ryan heard the clink of metal, and the footsteps walked back to his feet. There was a moment of silence, and then the axe slammed into his ankle. Again and again. The pain felt so unbearably real. But there was nothing Ryan could do but lay there until the nightmare ended. The next morning, Nate awoke, head pounding from his hangover. The fire pit was still roaring. He could have sworn that the fire had died before they passed out. He saw that Ryan was awake as well. So, please tell me you were finally able to disconnect and get some good sleep. Ryan? Nate shook Ryan's shoulder. Ryan's eyes were wide open, but he wasn't moving. Nate stood up in a panic and saw why. With fear-filled eyes, he looked back at the fire. There, in the pit, were Ryan's missing limbs.